G'day frothers, it's Will here from Flow Mountain Bike and welcome to this video review of the Trek Rail. The Rail is Trek's full-powered, long-travel e-mountain bike. It's built around 29-inch wheels with a 160mm travel fork and 150mm of travel at the back via the ABP suspension platform. It's designed for a similar kind of riding as other popular e-mountain bikes like the Specialized Levo, the Merida E160 and the Norco Sight VLT. Like its competitors, the Trek Rail is available in both alloy and carbon variants. The alloy frame carries on into 2023 unchanged from the original version, but the carbon frame has changed significantly from the bike we first tested at the launch back in 2019. The latest generation carbon frame is significantly burlier. It updates to a 1.8-inch head tube and a bigger diameter seat tube. The main frame has also stretched out and it now accommodates a bigger 750 watt-hour battery. Powering the Trek Rail is the Bosch Smart System with the excellent Performance Line CX motor. For 2023, the Carbon Trek Rail models will receive the new low-profile system controller and wireless mini remote. It'll be a while before we see those bikes arrive in Australia, however, so in the meantime we've been testing a 2022 model which is virtually identical, save for the LED controller and the Kiox 300 display. Now, geometry on the latest Carbon Rail is a little different from the previous version and the current alloy rail. The head angle is a little slacker at 64.2 degrees, and the reach has grown by quite a bit on our large size test bike. That comes in at 485mm, which is quite long. The seat tube angle is also clocked forward. That now comes in at 76.7 degrees. One number that hasn't changed though is the rear center length, which comes in at 448mm, and that is quite short for a Bosch-equipped e-bike with 29-inch wheels. Now, all of those geometry numbers are with the Minno Link in the default low position. Flip that chip into the high position and you'll lift the bottom bracket by 5mm and you'll steepen the angles by 0.4 of a degree. Now, in that high position, Trek also says the rail can be set up as a mullet with a 27.5-inch rear wheel. The BB will still be a bit lower though, so any riders who are considering that change may want to look at lifting the fork travel to 170mm as the rail frame is rated for it. There are 5 Trek Rail models currently available in Australia, with prices starting at around $6,500 for the Trek Rail 5. The bike that we've been testing here sits one step down from the top of the range. This is the Trek Rail 9.8 XT, and it has a recommended retail price of $12,500. For your money, you're getting an OCLV full carbon fibre frame with a RockShox Select Plus fork and a custom Super Deluxe RT3 shock with the through shaft damper. There's a Shimano XT group set and Bontrager Line Comp alloy wheels with an SE6 tyre on the front and an SE5 tyre on the rear. Confirmed weight for our Trek Rail test bike is 23.94 kilos, and as usual, that's weighed with the tyre set up tubeless and without pedals. It's certainly no lightweight, though it's perfectly reasonable for a big travel e-mountain bike with a big 750 watt-hour battery. While Trek offers many of its models in a huge array of sizes, the Carbon Rail is only available in Australia in medium, large and extra large. We're told that a small will be arriving later this year, however, which will come with a 625 watt-hour battery to fit inside its shorter down tube. To suit our 180 to 183 centimetre tall testers, we went with the size large. Now, as mentioned before, this is a significantly longer bike than its predecessor. The steeper seat tube angle does help to position the rider more centrally within the cockpit, though we do think it could be a little bit steeper. This was more the case for Dan, who has shorter upper body and prefers a more upright climbing position. To suit his proportions and riding style, Dan had to slam the saddle all the way forwards on the rails to steepen the effective seat tube angle and shorten the effective distance to the grips. Justin, on the other hand, had no such troubles, finding the cockpit to be perfectly comfortable out of the box. With that in mind, for anyone who's on the border between two frame sizes, you'll want to take a close look at the geometry chart because you might want to size down rather than up. As well as testing the Trek rail locally, we've also been spending some time up at Mount Buller over the summer season to put this bike through its paces. This place has proven to be a perfect test environment for a big and burly e-bike like the rail, with plenty of entertaining options for gaining elevation and some brilliant purpose-built descents to enjoy on the way back down. On the likes of the Delatite River Trail, Stonefly, Outlaw and A-Bomb, the rail has been totally in its element. On these rowdy alpine trails, we've been consistently impressed by this bike's outstanding suspension performance. It's beautifully balanced, offering great small bump sensitivity while still delivering heaps of high-speed control. The Zeb is of course a perfect match for a burly bike like the rail. The stiff 38mm chassis keeps the front wheel tracking where you want it, while the supple action helps to absorb off-camber impacts, maximising ground contact for increased grip. It's a similar story out back with the custom Super Deluxe shock. Trek says the IFP-less design of the through shaft damper helps to reduce the stick-slip effect when the shock is rapidly changing direction between compression and rebound. And given how supple and responsive it is back there, it's hard to argue with that claim. Combined with the trunnion bearing mount and the ABP linkage, the rail delivers incredible traction and compliance over a wide range of riding speeds and impacts. Decent mid-stroke support means the rail has surprisingly good pep on flowier jump trails though, and the fact that it only has 150mm of rear travel means it doesn't totally numb the trail like a longer travel e-bike can. Enhancing the rail's enthusiasm is its stiff carbon frame. And paired to the Zeb up front, the handling is sure-footed and direct. It never feels harsh though, with the supple suspension, the high volume tyres and the alloy rims, ensuring that the rail contours the terrain rather than pinballing you around. The short rear end also contributes to the responsive handling, helping to make the rail feel quite agile despite its heft. It rips through corners with confidence, and thanks to the supportive suspension, it's more than happy to take to the air. We also continue to be impressed by the Bosch Performance Line CX motor. Set to the adaptive EMTB mode, power delivery is responsive and intuitive. There's plenty of low-range torque on tap, and the overrun feature is fantastic on technical climbs. Despite not having enormously long chainstays, the rail is still very calm and composed on steeper gradients. There's very little wander from the front wheel, with the long wheelbase and the active suspension keeping the whole bike glued to the ground. Really, the only limiting factor on the climbs is the rear tyre, which didn't have as much bite as we wanted. The tread profile is a little too shallow, and it lacked grip when conditions were loose or wet. If this were our bike, we'd actually swap the SE6 to the rear and fit a softer compound tyre up front to fully exploit the rail's vast capabilities. As for the downsides of the Trek rail, well, after a dozen or so rides, we noticed a heavy clunking sensation on the descents, which felt a bit like a poorly adjusted headset. And this turned out to be from the upper battery mount, which had come loose from the frame, allowing the whole battery to rattle around inside the down tube. Our local Trek dealer put in a warranty claim, and within a few days we had a solution. This comprised of a small metal bracket which sits on the outside of the down tube with two bolts passing through it in order to tighten the upper mount against the frame. Since fitting that bracket, that clunking sensation has gone away, though it is of course a disappointing experience on a bike that costs over 12 grand. Having spoken to some other Trek dealers, it appears that we're not the only ones to have encountered this issue, which makes us wonder why bikes are being sold without that bracket in the first place. Even after that fix, the rail hasn't been totally quiet. There's still a little bit of movement in the battery, and of course the motor exhibits the usual clacking noise on the descents, though we found it pretty easy to get used to after the first couple of rides. One of the Minnow Link bolts and the main pivot came loose partway through testing, which required some fresh Loctite and a torque wrench in order to keep them snug. The rear axle has also come loose on a couple of occasions, so we'd recommend checking that periodically to make sure it remains nice and tight. And while the Trek rail is a mostly well-balanced bike, it has to be said that riding across flatter and more mellow terrain is not its forte. Its long wheelbase and overall heft can make it a bit of a handful on tight turns, which require more muscling to negotiate. It certainly rewards a more active and assertive rider, particularly when you're threading the front wheel through twistier single track. This does mean that for smaller folks and those who are newer to mountain biking, the rail might feel like a bit of a tank. If you're looking for a less brutish riding experience, you may want to consider the lighter and lower powered Fuel EXE, or even one of the alloy rail models which features slightly more conservative geometry. Though while it can be a lot to manage, we should point out here that for a full-powered e-mountain bike with dual 29-inch wheels, the rail is one of the best handling bikes in its category. It's certainly more fun and involving to ride than a bike like the Scott Patron, despite being more capable overall. It is a little less agile than the Specialized Levo, however, which shares the same amount of travel, but packages it into a dedicated mullet platform. Of course, you could fit a 27.5-inch wheel into the back of the rail, which would be a great option for riders who are looking for a more playful character, as well as a little more clearance between their arse and the rear tyre on the descents. If you're curious about how the Trek rail compares to some of the other e-mountain bikes we've reviewed, such as the Norco Sight VLT and even the Trek Fuel EXE, we've put some detailed comparisons in the full review over at flowmountainbike.com. If you're keen to check it out, just click that link in the video description below. And that brings us to the verdict on the latest generation Trek rail, which continues to be one of the best handling full-powered e-bikes we've ever tested. The cornerstone is its terrific suspension performance, which offers excellent grip and sensitivity all the way throughout the travel. Combined with its stout chassis, long wheelbase and burly build kit, the rail is capable of monster trucking its way down some pretty gnarly descents. It isn't a total barge on Flowier single track, however, which is largely down to its stiff carbon frame, the supportive suspension and those short chainstays. Certainly for a 24-kilo EMTB, this is one of the more fun and intuitive bikes to ride. It's also a mighty fine technical climber, and the 750 watt-hour battery provides a load of range for tackling proper all-day rides in the mountains. We reckon it could benefit from a steeper seat angle, and given how many frame sizes Trek offers in its regular mountain bikes, it'd be great to see the rail offered in a similar range of sizes. We were also disappointed to encounter such a glaring issue with the battery on our test bike, and this is an expensive purchase after all, so our expectations were very high. Once that issue was sorted though, the rail has proven to be a solid and reliable partner that's joined us on some epic rides over the summer season. We wouldn't necessarily recommend it for smaller and less experienced riders, as its overall heft and raked out geometry can make it a bit of a handful on more mellow terrain. But if you're after a powerful and capable e-bike that thrives on enduro type terrain, the rail delivers control and composure in spades, especially when things get steep, fast and chunky. Now, as mentioned before, there's a heap more information in the full review over at flowmountainbike.com. Make sure you click the link in the video description below to check it out. If you've got any further questions for us about this bike, drop those into the comments below. Otherwise, we hope you enjoyed this video and we'll see you guys next time. Tooroo!